Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. This is episode 55. We've been doing this for just over a year now, and we kind of realized that we haven't done an episode specifically towards club fitting, the importance of club fitting. So when Hal and I sat down to figure out who we were going to get on, we wanted to get the best, and we feel like we did. We got Mr. Ian Fraser from TXG up in Canada. Ian is one of the best club fitters in the world. He has an awesome YouTube channel with a bunch of great content, a lot of great stuff on social media. We're really excited to have him. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Chase, thank you so much. It's honestly an honor to be with both of you today.
Well, Ian, we're really excited. You know, the club fitting has really become very detailed. And, you know, I made a career out of playing golf. And so let's jump right in of the misconceptions that people have about club fitting. You know, a lot of people think that club fitting is going to make tremendous difference in their game. Is it or is it not?
It's always going to default to the golf swing, Hal. I mean, you know, my kind of tagline for this whole thing is the club that's right is the one that has the most positive influence on the golf swing itself, right? So we have to match up that delivery. We have to kind of manage the kind of, you know, the flaws within the swing. But ultimately, we're never trying to overhaul or override a bad golf swing. There's many days in here we'll send someone away and say, listen, now is not the time for you for new clubs. You know, you got to put a little bit more time into the swing itself. Then we'll be able to extract the performance out of the clubs. So, you know, I've came from the teaching side of things first, and obviously now into the club fitting side. So I always try to play the 75-25 rule. My 75% is with club fitting, my 25% is with instruction. So I can always try and balance the two out as much as I can.
It's interesting you said that, and we had a bunch of different questions to follow up about what you just said. Like, you know, I think a lot of times in this industry, people try to be 100% club fitter or 100% golf instructor. And I think it's almost impossible, because a lot of times what we see with club fitters here is they will fit to where the player is right this second, rather than any idea or any thoughts of where they may be headed. Do you know, one of the questions we had, and I'll skip ahead a little bit, was we talk about lessons in here. We talk about, we call them fittings that turn into lessons. And we have, you know, Hal and I are 99% lessons, and we've got our own specific club fitter world does a great job. But how often do you guys get into actually trying to help them with their golf swing a little bit? If they get in there wanting to they've traveled a long way to come see you for a fitting and they can't get it airborne, do you put your instructor hat on and try and help them a little bit?
Chase, if it's something that I feel that they can take away with them, that isn't going to be something that would, you know, in your case, require a second lesson or maybe a course of lessons. You know, if I feel like I can help them in that moment and that's something that really can stick, we'll go ahead and have a run at it. You know, and we've had great success at doing that at times, and other times, you know, maybe it doesn't quite stick, and, you know, the old problem still kind of comes back in. So you kind of have to pick your battles a little bit, because the worst thing we can do as fitters is give someone a little swing tip. They do it great in the bay. You fit them to clubs off of that swing tip, and then they go back to their home club and they default back to what they always done. And then really you've sent them away with a misfit golf club. So, you know, then it doesn't really reflect well in the process. So, you know, you do have to be careful. And I really do believe that's where experience comes into it, that you know when to bite your tongue and when to, you know, step forward with a little tip.
So a quick follow-up to Al's question about misconceptions. What, any shaft misconceptions, any club head misconceptions that you deal with that you like to just, if we could get you a microphone to the world of golfers and you could tell them one or two things to get them to not ever think the you know, the negative way again or the wrong way again, what would that be?
There's so many, Chase, in all honesty, but I think the one that really maybe bugs the club fitters, or we spend the most time trying to kind of educate about, would be that the role of the shaft plays in flighting the golf ball up and down. You know, a tip stiff shaft, a tip soft shaft. Really, the variance in those two is absolutely minute. You know, there's way bigger influences in making the ball go up and down before we would get to shaft flex. Loft, CG location are far more dominant factors when it comes to flighting. So when someone goes in and tries to buy a $500 shaft or $1,000 shaft with with the Autoflex or something like that, thinking it's the miracle cure, it never is. It absolutely never is. It has to be with layers of kind of physics in there. We've got to match up all the different things that are meaningful. So trying to get that microwave effect of just buying your way to a better game, it just doesn't work.
So, Ian, one of the things that I totally hear what you're saying, and I talk all the time in here about where the ball, what window is the ball going through in a 6-story building, and until a player can learn to control that, he can't play at the highest level. That's just a fact, because he can't predict where it's going to come down. And so, one of the things that we had locked down for me to ask you is, I don't like for players to lock into big long-term contracts with one company, because that limits what you can do as a fitter, basically. Yeah. I mean, talk about, you fit people into a lot of different clubs. Probably within one bag you fit into one club. When I first went out on the tour, they had 8 clubs from a manufacturer that had to be in your bag. It has gone to where they want 13 or 14 clubs in your bag.
Yeah.
Boy, does that limit the best players in the world to do that. So talk about that.
It really, really does, Hal. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's where we feel like our probably our biggest competitive advantage lies, in that we're not focused on, the clubs that go in your bag, the brands that go in your bag. I honestly couldn't care less. Truthfully, when I open the drawer for the irons or the drivers or whatever it is, I don't actually even think of them as brands. I think of them as, this is the club that has a deeper CG, a little bit more toe by CG, something that can create a ball flight. I'm just looking at a bunch of solutions for whatever problems I'm facing in the bay at that time. And when I open that drawer and I've got 50 driver heads versus I'm stuck to one manufacturer and I maybe have 3, I feel like I'm far more equipped to do my job and do the best I can for the player, which is the only thing we care about. I mean, we've got great relationships with all these manufacturers, but at the end of the day, I'm only concerned about the person that's in front of me.
Well, I mean, that doesn't limit the player the way you do it, but the manufacturers come in and they throw a lot of money at a young player, and the young player says, okay, I can lock in the next 4 or 5 years with this money. Well, here's what I know. I'm looking at my career in the rearview mirror, and the amount of money I made didn't do anything for my ego, but the way I played made me feel good or bad about me. So you agree with that, don't you?
I 100% agree with that. I mean, your story, I know a little bit about it, Hal. It's a brilliant story, and I love that you touch upon, trajectories and things like that, and one of the things I always talk to people in a fit about is trajectory, peak height, trying to establish that, window that the ball is flying through and, get that consistency. Mr. Hogan at Shady Oaks, when, working on that kind of ball apex and over that same tree in the Heenas caddy, walking back 10 yards, get the neck club to apex at the same, tree, all those sorts of things. We can do that with the equipment we have now. And, we've got hybrids that replace long irons for people who can't hit them the way you could, or whatever it might be. So, I 100%, believe in that. And, it's never been better to be a consumer. That's for sure. With all the options out there. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to do in Canada right now, we've got a real plethora of talent coming through, the young lads coming onto the tour. But what I'm trying to do is work with Golf Canada right now. And I would like to play a bigger role at TXG with this kind of new crop coming through, because I don't really want them tied to a brand as they come through. I want them getting onto the tour with the right clubs in their bag, and not just doing it because they get 12 dozen balls and, a dozen gloves or whatever it might be. That stuff's all irrelevant down the line. You're going to get there based on, being good enough, and let's get your equipment in the bag organized before you get on the tour.
Wow. I hope everybody heard what you just said, because especially all the real good young players out there, because, at the end of the day, I mean, everybody needs to make money. Everybody's trying to make money. But the truth is, how many birdies can you make and how can you limit the bogeys? And at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you feel good about yourself. Yeah. Nobody knows how much money you got in the bank account. It's all speculation, whether you've got any in there or not. But boy, when you lay those birdies down and you lay the score down, there's no speculation to that. Everybody saw it.
I love it. I love it.
It's interesting too how we talk all the time about how tour players are fragile, just like everybody else. And if you sign that deal with the club manufacturer. I mean, look, let's use Justin Rose as an example, right? Like whether it was Hanma's fault or whether he just played bad, but he signed a deal with Hanma for however long and struggled for however long, right? And now he's kind of back. And you see guys like Patrick Reed and some other names that are just going agnostic when it comes to clubs. But as players, as golfers, we're going to, at first, we usually blame ourselves. It's our fault that we're hitting bad shots. And if, like you mentioned some more on the tech side, Ian, about if the CG's in the wrong spot, if we're used to hitting it in certain windows and we're playing clubs that are completely different and that club manufacturer can't make clubs like the clubs that you had previously, you're going to be searching down a bunch of different crazy rabbit holes and you're going to get lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's going to be different kind of paths manufacturers are going down and it may suit certain players and it may really work against other players. I mean, you look at when Rory first came out with Nike, that first Covert wasn't a great driver for him. He had a large input in Covert 2.0 and came out and had that unbelievable year in 14, but he had a large input into the design of that head. It was a completely different head, that Covert 2, and kind of, manipulating that CG, getting it to align, with where the player needs it in order to perform. That's what players need. And I don't really think of tour players being any different from the players that I have in front of me. I'm still trying to achieve the same thing. I'm still trying to optimize the equipment for them. I don't think of it as a totally separate or different task. Ultimately, trying to extract the best out the clubs for them is the only objective.
So, Ian, Chase has got up here. Your thoughts on fitting people to length. So I'm jumping ahead, and that should have been Chase's question, but I have something that I want to add to that. That 100-mile-an-hour number in club head speed, is that mean anything to you? Or where does stiff move into X? When does someone swing it fast enough to go into an X shaft? That's something we hear from the novice in here. So maybe you can clear up. I mean, what is, 100 miles an hour, we see the better players can go over 100 miles an hour. Everybody else can't. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm looking over our shaft matrix in front of me here. We have about 200 different driver shafts available on the matrix. So one person comes in at 100 miles an hour, and they load it a certain way. They deflect it a certain way. They may use a ping head, which is 208 grams versus a Callaway head, which is 198 grams. That's going to influence the golf club to react in completely different ways. So you've got to layer upon everything that's going on there when you make that decision as to what shaft is going to go in there. 100 miles an hour, most people are going 65 grams stiff. But I've seen myself go, 75 grams stiff. I've seen myself maybe go a little bit lighter, maybe a 50 gram X, because I know that, the way that club head's going to manipulate that shaft, it's going to load it, is going to be right for that particular player. And I think that's part of what still needs to come out with club fitting. I look at things like Sportbox AI, what's about to occur with the AI world. I really think we're embarking in club fitting, and I'm kind of dipping my toe into this with a couple of AI companies right now. I think we're going to be able to basically pick up on a load profile that is right for certain players. So rather than we just say, your X amount of speed, you need this, your X amount of speed, you need that. We're going to get much more into the 3D motion of the golf club, the forces, torques that are placed upon it by the player. And I think that's going to give us much, much more information, as to what's going to impact the player. Gears has been doing it for quite some time. Michael Neff is a great friend, and he does phenomenal work with gears. And I think Sportbox may take that to the next more accessible level.
Ian, we had gears for a few years out at our previous location and had Michael out. Michael's an awesome guy, does a great job for gears. And we love, my background's in 3D. So I'm like bouncing off the chair when you're talking about sport, all this stuff. Cause that's where that's how Hal and I met. I say gears is the best club. The gears is still the best club fitting tool out there. It just takes a little bit of time. And depending on your business model and everything you're trying to do, it can be a little difficult to do all the things and all the, calibrate and do all the stuff that you need to do. But man, we had a lot of success with our better players, changing dynamic lie, changing the lie angle just based off dynamic lie, based off droop and all this stuff, and the toe down stuff that we kept seeing with a lot of our players. And we did it because of gears. We didn't have any other way to measure. And now obviously Quad and even TrackMan, they're trying to do some similar stuff, but yeah, we were huge fans of gears.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a wave. I love launch monitors as much as the next club fitter, but what I'm looking for now is a pre-impact launch monitor. I think we can get into great impact conditions and create great ball flights, but if I can influence how you get to that impact earlier and better, then that's going to benefit the player so much more. And I feel like gears and Enzo and things like that are the pre-impact launch monitors that we need as fitters for more information. You need a really educated eye, unless you have one of those systems, to see how that club got to impact, again, the forces and torques that we talk about. When we had a gear system for about a year, and it was really unfortunate. We never really capitalized on its full capabilities. And what I wanted to do with the gears system was two parts to the fitting. So Chase, you'd come in one day and I would basically just put you through a load of tests. Long clubs, short clubs, heavy clubs, thin grips, basically go through a whole range of tests. You're not trying a Callaway and an Aldila shaft. It's, that comes the next day. Because I think golf or club fitting is still played in this really safe space right now. This, like Hal said, this 100 mile an hour and you get designated a 65 gram stiff. Well, who knows? Because, the one thing I always challenge our club fitters to be is curious. And unless you're curious enough to go elsewhere and start to try some different things, you don't know if you could actually make, an improvement to that strike location or get that club in a certain, acceleration pattern. You only know what you've tried. And I don't think enough of us try different options.
Wow. So next question here. I've always said you can't buy a golf game.
Yep.
Can you do that? Can good players, can a 2 handicap buy his way into being a +2?
I'd be more inclined to default into your camp, Hal, because I've seen enough of those types of people now. We've seen 18s become 10s in a season. A 2 to a +2 is a kind of a different move. That's a really tough thing to bring the scorecard under par, isn't it? It's a mental challenge and a physical challenge. The 18 to 10 is kind of a progression, but 2 to +2 is a slightly different thing. But I see it every day in here. I really, really do. I see us, reverse the aging process for players. The swing speed's going that way, but the ball speed's going that way. Launch conditions are wrong, and then we get done, and then they're much, much better. I worked with a 70-year-old Irishman last week, Patrick Morris, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Patrick walked in, hit his driver 198, and walked out hitting it 241. At 70 years old. Yeah. So, for someone like Patrick, there's a set of circumstances that causes that. The driver he was gifted was a Sim 2, right? So it was a new driver, new technology, but it wasn't the right one. He's ended up walking out now. Patrick's a little bit of a kind of, a little bit over the top, little out to in, and adds a little too much dynamic loft. So getting that loft down was great for him, and he's not going to put the work into the swing to get the club more from the inside and kind of get, a little bit better kind of wrist positions in order to control that club face through impact. Patrick needed a lower lofted club and something that he felt he could create some speed and release with. And that's for him where he went from, 85 miles an hour club head speed to 91, and his efficiency went from 141 up to 145 on the quad, and we kind of got all those things to happen. So I don't believe you can buy a game, but we can go a long way to improving, what you've already got.
So I have a personal question to ask here. Sorry.
Yep.
Had to get personal, didn't it? So, I'm pre-launch monitors.
Yeah.
By and large. So when I could swing the club the fastest, I didn't know what that speed was. So once I was able to determine how fast I could swing it, Chase, what's the highest since you and I have known each other? Maybe 107 miles an hour, as fast as I ever got.
108.
I'm 107 or 108 miles an hour. Now I'm be 64 in 2 months. I'm probably 102, 103 miles an hour. Is there anything, I'm just curious, in your estimation, without seeing my golf swing or anything else, that might gain 3 or 4 miles an hour speed just in equipment?
So we done a test yesterday. So TPT are a line that we've got in the wall here at TXG. So we have their 14 low, which is their 86 gram driver shaft. We have their 21 high, which is their 45 gram driver shaft. I gained about 4 miles an hour in club head speed from the 45 to the 86. Now that's an extreme. Most people in most cases are going from 50 to 65. That's a tighter range that the OEMs offer. But if you do go a little bit lighter, I do believe there are some fairly significant gains. For me, then it becomes, how do you manage the club? Can you keep it on plane? And if you can, there's big gains that can be made. Are you a plane changer? Are you somebody who kind of, takes the club, maybe a little underneath and then a little over and kind of have a hard time? You're less likely to gain the speed if you're a plane changer. So I'll look at every case differently, Hal, but have you experimented with anything with kind of weight and length and, different lofts?
Well, no, I hardly play anymore, to be honest with you, Ian, but
right.
I play a little bit, but so I grew up when we had heavy golf clubs because we were really interested in accuracy. And, I've tried really hard. One of the things that we spent lots of time on when I was on the tour was the shaft that would allow you to flight your irons the way you wanted to flight them, which is what you started out talking about. And so the lighter I go, the less I feel it. And I'll tell you another thing. The longer I go, the less I feel it too, in terms of length of club. You agree with those things?
I agree with that 100%. You have to be aware of the player that you're working with and the era that they played in, right? So you need to take somebody who came in an era of heavy clubs. Heavy is going to always do better for you than light. You're going to lose that club somewhere in transition with a light club because that's not how your sequence is going to sort of link up. I agree with that 100%. And I think, again, that comes down to experience. And, our guys in the Bay, sometimes maybe the fits that they do struggle with are with a player like that type of thing. They look at someone and maybe they judge the age, maybe they judge the swing speed and they go, oh, well, longer, lighter is going to be better. Not in this case. You've got to understand how that player loads the club and how you can sequence it. Because sometimes heavier can be a lot faster than light. Just depends on the player. Right.
And I did a lot of work with Lim Mucklow, and he did a lot of tests. We were doing 3D tests with him up, and I traveled to Toronto a couple different times to see him. He's a good friend, and we were doing all kinds of different. From he would go 80 to 40 gram shafts, doing 48 to 44 length, and the results were all over the place. Some guys were faster with 48, some were faster with 44. Different grip sizes. It was fascinating to me, just the differences that everybody had. My first question with regards to Hal with you, and you kind of answered it, but with Hal being a better player now, obviously he just answered my question. He said longer he can't feel it, but would you say the better player can tend to handle the longer shaft, or is it all so dependent on their story, how they grew up, what they grew up playing?
I think generally speaking, Chase, the better player can handle the longer shaft. They can adapt to kind of the environment, the sequence a little bit better. And again, when we talk about the shafts that we have on our wall, the tools that we have at our disposal, I can maybe play with Hal's feels a little bit. Go, okay, you like to feel heavy. Okay, let's really get something that's got a very low balance point. Maybe let's give Hal the feel that he's got all that weight in there, but we maybe don't have to have the real gram weight. We can give Hal the feel of the weight. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can sort of go about that. And it's just the layering of one thing on top of another. I never try and fix any problem with one solution. I can try and do it from 5 or 6 different ways. And if you can get 4 or 5 of those to kind of activate something for the player, that's where you see those big spikes in performance. So, I'd love to, work with somebody like Hal and that type of thing to see, okay, what buttons can we push in your swing to activate those key feels and then start to get the speed out of it.
So handling it is in the eyes of whoever's judging it at the time. So,
absolutely.
I was a pretty tough critic on myself. So I could handle it as far as someone else might be concerned, but I knew I was giving up something when I went longer. I wasn't gaining enough distance for the amount of accuracy that I was sacrificing with it.
Right. Yeah, it's so true, Hal. I mean, they've got this. There's some of the strokes gained information's out there right now. So, for every yard you're offline, every yard you're more offline, you need to have gained 3 yards in distance for that to somewhat cancel that out from a strokes gained perspective. So if you're 10 yards wider dispersion than you were before we started, that 30 yards is an awful lot to gain for us to sort of somewhat come out even, where in time that, you'll take advantage of some and you'll maybe make a few errors on the others. So, we always have to pick our battles. It's one of the things when it comes to club fitting, I'm really excited for the evolution of, I want to get away from, yards gained in the bay, accuracy gained in the bay. I want club fitting to be about strokes gained, because it's got to apply the same way to it does on the golf course. The way the guys are analysing their games now, we know all the things that can lower scores, week in, week out. We got to drive it good. We got to putt it good. Colin Morikawa's proximity, we know what that does for his scores, and the stroke average. I want to do the same thing in the bay, so that somebody maybe can gain 5 yards, but they've gained potentially 2 strokes with the driver, because whatever the performance characteristics we've given them. I want all of us as club fitters to get away from this. You gain 10 yards, that's a good fit. That might not be true.
So I follow up with another question here. Lie in terms of a driver. The manufacturers have messed with the driver to make them draw biased. And I mean, you agree with that or not?
Oh, I mean, that toe is sitting, up in the air now. And I was actually texting a good friend of mine, Trotty, last night at TaylorMade, and asking Trotty, I said, if you get any of those flat TaylorMade sleeves, and I said, well, there's only a couple of guys that get access to those, but we'll see. And I like a flat driver. I like to see it sit that way. I don't like to see the driver go left, Hal. I'm not sure, that's your kind of preference, to see it sit that way.
Oh man. Well, so we mentioned Michael Neff with Gears. He was in here and he took the driver that I beat Tiger with in 2000, which I drove it great with, and it was 8 degrees flatter than the driver I was trying to play with at the time.
What chance have you got?
I was part of the era that they really screwed up our driving ability at that time right there. And, they didn't tell us about it. What used to aggravate me, I'm passionate about this because it aggravated me. It was my lifetime. They wouldn't tell us what they did, although we kind of knew what they did. They didn't want to have us prejudge what we put in our hands.
Right.
And, we had to try to figure it out, even though they knew. It would have helped. We'd all gotten to the eventual end we wanted had we had all the information.
Yeah. I mean, you've developed a game based on equipment, and then all of a sudden someone changes the rules on you.
Exactly.
We're going to hand you this equipment. I remember it when I was working for TaylorMade at the time, and obviously, the 2000s, early 2000s, how good Retief Goosen was. Phenomenal, right? Great driver, the golf ball, great. TaylorMade would clamp those burners in there and their clamp on the truck, and they would pull that, they would flatten that, that bonded driver so much. When R9 came out and it was an interchangeable club, Goosen was toast. He was. I mean, you look at Goosen's career after 2009, 2010, gone. You know, and it's not just the fact he was getting a little bit older. You know, he started to suffer from the lefts. You know, he had that flat driver, that heavy matrix shaft, those leather grips, all those things that made that driving a weapon for him. And then they took that, you know, all away from him.
Yeah,
Well,
man, I'm fixing to go back and get my bubble driver out, my tailor-made bubble driver that's 8 degrees flatter. I don't care what I'm giving up.
well,
Because left, I hate left, and that's all I can do. That's really why I don't play as much, because I hit it left too much.
Right.
Well, and you think about it too, Hal, and like you go from 8 degrees flat with a spinny golf ball to 8 degrees more upright and a ball that doesn't spin as much as you're used to, that you grew up playing. So those snap hooks are knuckle balls. I used to think when I was younger, all my snaps were spinny. They're not. That ball's knuckling. It's not. Doesn't have any spin on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, the way that people will try and do it nowadays is can obviously manipulate tip flex in order to create a little bit more downward deflection and droop, but then that plays havoc with your strike pattern. You know, you start getting all sorts of offline with the strike, and then you're never matching up that CG with the golf ball, and then you start to gear everything, and you know, it's just a guessing game where your golf ball is going to go after that.
So, Ian, you mentioned something about you wish you could fit based off strokes gained. I've got kind of two questions. Number one, we have a lot of kids in here that are on kind of these monthly plans where they come in and they practice and they give weekly lessons or bi-weekly lessons or whatever. And a lot of times with our fittings, I call them monthly fittings, because they come in, they try something. We might even let them take it to the course. They come back, they try something. Now, obviously, business model, you know, doesn't work for everybody, but in a perfect world, would you fit people over a longer length of time than just coming in one time? And again, seeing those numbers change. Hey, I got you more distance, or hey, I got you better dispersion. Now this is what you need, versus seeing them over a little bit more time, letting them kind of feel it out and kind of get used to the club a little bit and see if that's the actual answer.
100%, Chase. The only thing I care about is how someone plays over the long term. So recently, I've just partnered with Arcos in order to create this program where all of our fitters, if you go through our fitting program, all of our fitters have a client base that they basically keep tabs on their players when they're away from TXG. So you leave the building, you get your clubs. We want to know exactly how you're playing. We can set parameters that if your dispersion with your 3-wood that you just get fitted for falls out of our acceptable range, we'll get an email and it'll tell us that, you know, Hal is no longer performing the way we intended with his 3-wood. You know, email Hal and get him in for a refit. Because, you know, the worst thing that could happen to our company is you feel like you've you know, been given a bad fit or you've not get value out of your purchase. So over time, we can then, you know, it's you know, it's not a process. It's not a linear process. There's not a start and a finish. It's a continual loop, you know, is the way we view the client process here at TXG. I want you back every year. Loft and lie checks. How's your swing? Are you still working on that move? Are you any further down the road with it? Can we make your equipment work for you a little bit better? That's how we do our job better as fitters.
So you mentioned something there. 3-wood used to be the easiest club in the bag for me to hit. Today, I don't feel like it is nearly as easy to hit. Do you find that same thing in your club fitting?
Yeah, it's 3-woods are a real challenge for a lot of players. I really wish the manufacturers would do a little bit more with some 16 and 17 degrees. They kind of got away from that because it's a bit of an inventory nightmare for them. You know, so they make a 15 or 14 degree head that closes to 16 or opens to 13 or 12. Well, that's no good if you need the 16 or 17, but you need it to sit slightly open because you don't want to see it go left. You know, and so there's just this adjustable hosel is kind of playing a little bit of havoc with fairway woods right now, and there's not really a sweet spot for a lot of players, and we find a lot of people have a hard time with that particular club.
Well, a 3-wood has multi-purpose to it.
Yep.
So, you know, 3-wood was a safe club for me, you know, and I played a lot of golf with Jack Nicklaus. Jack Nicklaus hit a lot of 3-woods off the tee. So do you use your 3-wood? For me, my 3-wood more important was when I needed it to go for a par 5 and 2.
Right.
And with the less spinny balls that we have right now and the low loft, I mean, they built 3-woods where some people, it's a driving club almost.
Yeah,
and,
it's a second driver.
That driving club won't work on that par 5 into the green either, So
you're absolutely right. I worked with a young lad the other day who's heading down to Q school, and same thing. He kind of he can drive it a little erratic sometimes, so he wants a 3-wood that he can kind of turn over and squeeze out a little bit of distance. But we were able to kind of set it up for him also where he could kind of hit the 2800 spin right to lefter or the 3500 spin left to righter. So we really had to work with that club, get the right head shaft combo to get him to feel that he could kind of deliver both of those things. But you're really working with really good players when you're doing that type of thing. That's not something that's on the table for the weekend warrior. So it is very challenging.
Ian, one of the things that we see a lot in here, and I'm kind of passionate about just due to my build. So I'm 6'7" with a 6'4" wingspan. So
holy moly.
So I should have played basketball, but I wasn't quite enough to make it. So I stuck with golf. Good player. I played professionally for a while, all that stuff. I had some instructor tell me I needed 2 inches over at one point. I'm at about 1.25 inches, but my irons are always so heavy. But not so much a fit about me and more so a fit about different builds. And honestly, it's more about length. And that's kind of the question that I have for you. To me, in my personal opinion, I think we do a terrible job with length. How do we fit the length? Do we static wrist to floor? Some people have wide shoulders, some people have long torsos, some people have long legs, short arms, long arms, all that stuff. We're friends of Scott Cowks, and Scott's a great dude. Scott's going to assess everything he can before he's going to make a suggestion with your golf swing. And I feel like we as an industry need to do a better job with length, trying to fit, a short guy with long arms, and the chart says standard length and 4 degrees flat. And you kind of mentioned this earlier and said you're going to fit based off of kind of low point, what the circle looks like, what the swing looks like. And that's what we see. We see a lot of guys with too long of clubs and too upright, or frankly, too short of clubs. How can we come up with a better way to fit length?
It's a great question. I mean, so my methodology for it is it's a dynamic part of the fit. We're not going to do a very good job getting to the static answer of it. I know there are some things that can give us some clues, statically, but I'm always trying to then just manage low point and strike point. Trying to make sure that club is exiting out 3-4 inches ahead of the golf ball, making sure that we're managing obviously the strike height, the kind of lateral discrepancy or dispersion on that strike. So that's kind of, for me, the first 15 shots of the fit on an iron fit is I'm kind of playing with that a little bit. How can I move it? Can I move it? Or is every club I'm going to give that player? Because sometimes the player will override everything you give them. They will just solid. Exactly. They'll just find their way back to that same strike point that they always do, and they'll just manipulate it. Others are very easy, to move strike point and low point with. So, I would be lying to you if I said I had a method. I would say I have a feel for how to do it with the players in front of me based on the delivery characteristics I see within those first 15 shots. I've given them kind of a range, from a weight range, a shaft profile range, a head range. I mean, people still don't know that cavity backs deflect more downward than blades. There's more mass out in that toe side than there is in the long hosel of a blade. People don't know there's more downward deflection that's going on with that. So again, there's just a lack of information. I still feel like club fitting's in the dark ages. I really do. I feel, I learn from instructors. I learn from the people who are taking, the biomechanics and the kinematics to the next level, guys like yourself on 3D and things like that. Where do you go to learn about club fitting these days? That's a really, a really kind of poor state that we find ourselves in. So, we have kind of 3 pillars at TXG. We fit, we build, we educate, and we try to do all those things in equal portion.
Yeah, I mean, it's guys like Lim Mucklow that are kind of pushing the envelope of, he was doing.
Liam does a brilliant job with that stuff. I mean, he embraces all of that, with his swing cat, with his gears, and what Carson does with his CG locators and all that sort of stuff. They do a brilliant job. And his certification, I send that to people all the time. Go do that.
Yeah, I did it. Had our club fitter do it. Like I said, Liam's a good friend and super smart guy. And he made the statement, and we touched on it earlier, but he made the statement that he goes, I don't want club fitters and I don't want golf instructors. I want both. There's no reason why somebody can't come to you and you can help solve both problems for them. And that's where I think it can't be, you can't be 100% golf instructor. You can't be 100% club fitter. You've got to kind of bridge the gap between both to answer your customers' questions, because you can't be,
absolutely.
It can't be 100% both, 100% either or, for sure.
You can't, and I'm never going to have the depth of technical, swing knowledge like yourself or Scott, and I work with Scott every weekend here, and he tells me things, he told me something the other day, about his Cobra pattern that I'm like, really? I've never heard anyone, talk about that before. But sure enough, we make a few swings and I'm hitting driver, the straightest I've hit driver in years. And it completely goes against what my feels are telling me is likely to happen. I'm thinking I'm going to, hit it dead crooked left. But he's got this club face in a position that I can finally rotate my body and get out the way. And, it's a complete game changer. So I tip my hat to you guys and the depth of knowledge you have when it comes to the biomechanics.
What are your thoughts about, we've dabbled with measuring people in their golf posture, like comfortable golf posture, and then just kind of, making a fake grip on where they think, and from an instruction eye, we'll kind of look at it and say, okay, maybe a little bit more forward bend or a little bit more knee flex, or whatever it is. And then measuring, say, wrist to floor, trying to come up with a better way to measure statically to at least give us a head start. What was fascinating to us, we did it with about 30 different players, and the measurements were all over the board. Over the board. And so we would base it off of like where we were, like I was 36.5 wrist to floor, whatever the number was. But then we had some guys that were like 38. And I'm like, what's the length of your clubs? And he's like, half an inch over. And I'm like, let's talk about that. So I'm fascinated to see where this goes, to see if there's anything we can do because to me, the toughest students that come in are really, really tall and they've got standard length clubs. I'm like, look, man, I know you came in for a golf lesson, but you need clubs. Or somebody that's really, really short and the toe of the club sticking off the ground and they're jumping at it to try and find the bottom. I'm like, look, you need to cut these things down an inch and flatten them a ton. And they're like, well, I just got fit to standard and standard. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. And I think that's where you and I will always be the best allies for one another. Because, I'm going to see times where I go, I've got nothing in this wall that is going to do you any justice or, going to do you any good. You've got to go and take some lessons. You have to go and, you've got to go and fix what you're doing. Nothing I give you is really going to make your ball flight more predictable. And you for the same token will always say to your player, listen, we want to build you a functional, fundamentally sound golf swing, but you can't do it with those clubs. You're always going to be struggling to play, some form of consistent golf. If you're fighting your golf clubs day in, day out. So, I think some of the modeling stuff, Chase, is very, very interesting. I think as we get into this world of AI and pattern recognition, being able to sort of see the patterns that our eye can see, but how do I pass on the 20 years I've spent club fitting people to my intern who's with me for the next 6 months? It's just impossible. But if we get to the point where we can recognize those patterns and really filter out the kind of time wasting process of handling things that are never going to work, there's value to that somewhere down the line. But I'm not ready to discard the human element yet. I still think there's a connection between humans that we do need to always make. I'll never be passing over my job to a computer, that's for sure.
I could jump forward to a question here, but you just kind of delved into it here. You want to ask some questions that we had from social media, or?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny you said that at the end about handing your job over to a computer, because we talk about that all the time with all the tech we have. You still need a doctor to read the MRI and prescribe the changes. It's always going to be that way, and that's where some of the big box stores here in the US that do a good job fitting, but there's still a lot of people that go to them and they get bad results just because the intern wasn't prepared to answer the questions. So as you saw, we tagged you on social media and got a lot of people interested in some of your thoughts on some certain questions. So I've got 6 or 7 quick little replies, nothing crazy. Thoughts on a set pitching wedge or a specialist 46 degree like a Vokey?
Player to player, I think more players will deal with or will do better with a set wedge than they will with a specialist wedge. If we play a variety of shots and we need the technology that's on the face, we need the specific bounce, we need the specific sole configuration that's on the specialist wedge, great. If they can compress the ball enough to generate enough ball speed, the modern iron is making it very difficult for the wedge manufacturers because the modern iron is so hot. And in the wedges, obviously, there's only so much we can do with that style of golf club. I'm seeing more people play set wedges, but case to case, it's we decide that way.
I liked what you said. The ball speed will be a little lower with the Vokey versus the set wedge. And Hal, if you have any thoughts, feel free to jump in. This one's a good one, and this is something that I've kind of been dabbling with lately. Thoughts on lie angles progressing through the set, or staying all the same at, say, one upright across the board, one flat across the board? And specifically, should wedges be bent flatter to help good players that fight poles?
Yes, and yes to the second question. And the iron set should be set for lie angle, each club tested for its individual delivery. You're going to get the guy or gal who is a bit of a handle raiser, who, when they get low loft, pushes everything to the right. So they're using lots of vertical force. They're popping up out their posture. The handle's coming up. Everything goes to the right. Well, they're not really trying to extract nearly the same amount of force out of the 9-iron and the wedge. So they kind of stay a little bit better in their posture. That toe stays up, and then the short iron goes left. The amount of sets I've done for people that have, upright long irons and flat short irons, and you end up kind of with this kind of linear lie angle kind of progression is quite remarkable. So, but I do believe every club has to be tested, for its own specific lie angle.
That's really interesting. So for us, we've got 7-iron heads. We don't have, just like most people have 7-iron heads. How do you recommend we go about fitting? We order them all the same, and then we just try to crank on them. We just then test them with a quad or TrackMan or whatever and bend them.
Yeah. So is it fit carts you've got, Chase?
Yeah, I mean, and just speak generally to most fitters if anybody's listening.
Yeah, so I think if you have the ability like we do here, so in the fit, our connector system allows us to obviously move the lie angle in the fit. So if we see on quad dynamic lie angle causes a bit of a problem, we can obviously go do that in the fit rather than going. We've got 62 degrees 6-iron, and we go, okay, your club is 5 degrees toe down. We're going to make that 3 or 4 degrees toe up and send them away with that recommendation. I don't feel good about that. I've got to have them see the change to the ball flight before I'm happy to send them away. So, we've got to make that adjustment, in the bay right here and doing that. And lie angle doesn't have to be a perfect thing. I done away with lie boards, about 10 years ago and stopped using those because I don't mind a little bit of toe down or a little bit toe up if it helps to match up the face to path a little bit better and helps, with that particular miss. I just don't ever like to see it any more than 3 degrees toe down or 2 degrees toe up. I've got about a 5 degree window that I'm really comfortable in. Anything outside of that, and I'm kind of getting a little concerned.
Any to expand on that a little bit, if for the guys listening at home that aren't sure if their irons are fit, can you look at divots? Can you look at any kind of crazy ball flight stuff that you see when if we're 4 or 5 up or 4 or 5 down or 4 or 5 up?
Yeah, I mean the divot one's a hotly debated topic, isn't it?
Sure.
I'm a toe down divot guy, but my miss is left. Well, what happens to me is, I go for a fit and the rookie goes, well, Mr. Fraser, you're impacting on the toe there. We're going to make your clubs more upright and get that right going through the middle of the golf club. And that tape will show a lovely mark in the bottom. Well, all of a sudden I'm hitting these left, and I can't play the game anymore. Well, that's no good either. So, we have to understand, again, I went to bite her tongue and went to offer some advice.
One quick follow-up to your testing 4-irons and pitching wedges. Do you think OEM should start offering more heads in their fitting cart?
Yes, because they're the ones that can control the costs enough to do so. Our business model is a struggle. So we've got, 200 or so iron shafts in the wall for our 6 and 7 irons. So we use 7 irons for the kind of really strong lofted irons of today. And we use 6s for the more traditional irons. If we were to then have 4s and wedges, we would need to then obviously have triple the amount of shafts on the wall. And, we just wouldn't have the space to do that within our model. So we always say, listen, come back. There's a follow-up. Once we have the set, we're very comfortable with the recommendation. Let's just gap out the set once they're all built.
Puring shafts, does it matter?
In some cases, I've seen it matter a lot. I've seen in cases we've had to discard the shafts that we would have ultimately installed them had we not put them through the puring process. It's kind of like going into the barn. You roll the pull cue across the table, and it's the crooked one makes the gadunk, gadunk, gadunk as it rolls across the table. Well, you get some, steel shafts that are warped, and I've been puring shafts and when they fall out of line straightness, no, and this isn't a dig at any OEMs, but there isn't any OEMs checking down the beam length to see, how straight the thing is. They're taking 7 shafts out the bag. They're, weight sorting them. They're prepping their heads and they're building them, and off you go. A lot of the shafts that we have doesn't make it through our QC because of puring. I think that's one of the things with puring that people don't ever really talk about, is that it's a quality control, element as well. From a puring perspective, there are some shafts that I would 100% of the time pure, and there were some that I just don't worry about. The one puring video we done in the channel, Chase, I don't know if you ever saw that one. We had an Acra RPG shaft. It's their flagship shaft. They make it in Japan. As well as a shaft really can be made. We pured it. We had it installed unpured. It didn't make any difference in the test that we done. None whatsoever. And that was looking at deflection, droop, all the kind of dynamic things that we could measure. Didn't make a difference. So there's an argument for both, but I would always say to people, control the quality of the build so that it doesn't ever compromise the quality of the fit.
Stock versus aftermarket shafts. Are they worth the price jump?
There are some really bad stock shafts out there. Some really bad ones.
That was a funny way to answer that question.
It depends. There's some really bad ones, and not, we got our knuckles wrapped a little bit a couple of weeks ago by the guys at Mitsubishi, because the new the new Kylie that is available for no upcharge with a TaylorMade. We always just assumed that was a made-for TaylorMade shaft. It's absolutely not. It's the aftermarket, high-end, high-modulus Kylie. We answered a question on our Q&A, and we just said, yes, it must be a made-for. There's no way it's the same one as the one that's $450 in our wall. Because why would Mitsubishi do that to us? That was our thinking. Why would they say you can have it for free, but you're going to have to charge $450 for it? We're going to make you sign a contract to say you can't sell it for a penny less. That's a bit of a strange one. So you need to be very careful with stock shafts. The OEMs are doing a great job with irons. So Modus and Project X and True Temper, most of those are now available for minimal, in some cases, no upcharge. So, there's a lot of money to be saved on irons. When it comes to the Ventus stuff and the really high-end, high-quality stuff, I believe in the investment of that type of stuff. Get those parts right, really get that, get the balance and get that fit really dialed in. Don't compromise it by going with a shaft that saves you a few bucks.
Hal, any thoughts?
Go ahead.
No, I was asking you any thoughts. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I've had a little bit of a problem with the ability to change the driver with the way it's fitted in, the shaft is fitted into the club.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any problem with that? I'm just curious.
With this new modern connector system?
Yeah, with the new modern tech, being able to change the loft of the driver, it just doesn't feel as solid to me as when the club went straight into the driver. What are your thoughts?
We were hugely concerned. I was still with TaylorMade at that time when that R9 product launched, and we thought there would be ball speed leakage out of the kind of maybe a less secure bond between head and shaft. We were kind of, how can this possibly be as secure as kind of the length of those old hosels on the drivers, and we're getting 2.5 inches of insertion and things like that. I mean, how can we now we're getting 1.25 inches and we're tipping the shaft the rest to try and simulate the shaft performance. That's a different ball game. But I would say, Hal, I would have to treat that as a generational thing. You and I working together, I'm going to give that a different answer to the 21-year-old college kid that comes in who's got so much different force applied. So I think it's more of a problem for you and I to figure out, and less of a problem for me and the kid to figure out, because they just swing it so differently now. It is what I can see.
Okay, so you didn't give me any hint as to what I needed to do.
I'm coming down to Texas to tell you what you need. I'm coming down to the studio and we'll figure that out.
We're ready.
Come on.
Anytime.
Come on. All right, give us a little elevator pitch on how you handle putting.
All face angle, horizontal, vertical face angle. We've got to manage the face angle in putting. I'm not really a big one for. You've got to like the look of the putter. All that sort of stuff. You've got to be able to aim the putter, and you've got to be able to return it to square. And you have to manage the window within. The putter is face is square for as long as you possibly can. We use Quintic. I'm not sure what you guys have at the academy, but Quintic is, but for me, by far the best putter fitting system. The other ones are phenomenal. Getting you a face angle that matches your stroke. But I want to know how does the ball roll? How does that match up? So whether we're kind of working with a higher handicapper who consistently hits it all over the face, and we need to give them higher MOI. Whether we get them into a blade, we're trying to match the rate of rotation, the strike point, and the face angle impact. The rest of it we can kind of manipulate with loft and lie, length, all that sort of thing. But it all comes down to face angle when it comes to putter.
Any misconceptions that you see most people have with putting that you'd like to get them to think differently?
Yes, putters with toe hang open and close faster. That's a bit of a bad one. One of the major OEMs still actually has it on their website that if you want the putter to close faster, you need a putter with toe hang. Completely the opposite. We see day in day out the rate of rotation slow down the more toe hang you have in the putter, the more the weight is outside the axis of the shaft. There's that. I think I saw a question, Chase, on the Twitter was about Ian's disdain for center shafted putters. I think that was a question I saw in there. Well, center shafted putters, the rate of rotation, I've seen that go upwards of 100 degrees per second. Good luck trying to match that face angle up. And I've just said to you, face angle is the holy grail. And if that putter's rotating at 100 degrees per second, your ability to return that to square has to be almost robotic for you to make that work. Right. So, the best players in the world at times will have a dabble with center shafted putters, but how many of them truly stick with it? I can maybe think of one or two. Mackenzie Hughes is one that puts really well with a center shafted putter. Darren Clark used to putt really nicely with a center shafted Red X that a friend of mine, Larry Watson, gave him. But there's not many people ever stick to a center shafted putter.
And to your point, there's just no forgiveness because the thing is spinning right around its axis. Where
either side, yeah. I mean, you've got like a lab putter, directed force, and that's a truly torque-free putter. You spin that thing, and that head just twirls around. You take a center shafted putter, and there's actually torque either side. So you've kind of got all sorts of forces going on against that face, which just destabilize that face. And when we try and match up the face angle at impact, it's a lottery what you get at impact with a center shafted putter and a player who can't control that face.
So gross generalization, help our guys that fight pulls and help our guys that fight pushes. If we're fighting pulls, do we need more toe hang? And if we're fighting pushes, do we need more more face balanced?
So if you're a pusher, you want to get more sort of face balance. You want to try and get that. You want a little less rotation in that putter. If you're getting pushes and you've got a putter with toe hang, an old zing, something like that, an old 8802, that putter is going to fall behind the shaft axis and it is not going to want to catch up. So face balance for the pusher and for the puller, definitely something that has a little bit that can slow that rate of rotation down. So get as much mass out to that toe side. Actually, the blade length really matters as well, Chase. From where the putter, the shaft goes into the head to the toe, the measurement of that distance is a big factor at that rate of rotation as well. So toe hang and obviously putter design are both vital in that.
So Ian, let's end with this: feel versus numbers. Would you like fitting to feel, or do you like fitting to the numbers? Which one more?
With you, we're gonna fit to feel, and I'll control the numbers, but I'm going to fit to your feel. And we're going to key into the things that you can manipulate to shape the ball, to get your flight windows. I'm going to play with different balance points in the shaft, head weights. I'm going to position the CG in different parts for you. The player that comes in to see me who's has a less finely tuned feel for the game, I'll use the numbers with them. I'll use the numbers to guide them, because I can give a lot of different players two different shafts, maybe a 2.5 degree torque, a 4.5, and an 8 degree torque, and they go, yeah, they all feel pretty similar. And I'm going like, what are you feeling here? Some people's feel is just much less kind of sensitive than someone like yours. So, that's my role as a fitter, to know what do I need to give the player in front of me to get the most out of it. And again, that comes down to just experience.
So you used this player, his name in the beginning, Rory McIlroy.
Yep.
And could you, you're world-class fitter. Could you, you could play a big part in a guy's game like that right there.
Mm-hmm. And
I think the world needs to hear that, because when I was playing the tour, fitting wasn't even, it was a joke, really, how we just hit lots and lots of clubs till we found one that we liked, basically. Mm-hmm. It's more precise than that now. I know it is.
Yeah.
And is it precise enough to make a difference in somebody's game like Rory McIlroy?
100%. Absolutely. There's so much you can do now with a player. When you understand his tendencies, good and bad, what's happening? Why does he get that snapper on the bad day? What can we do to that? Again, we talk about rates of rotation. We talk about positioning of CG. Do we need to position the CG a little bit more toe side for Rory so that the toe strike doesn't behave like a toe strike? We need to manipulate strike behavior. There's all sorts of those different types of things. Someone like Rory, keying into the feels. What does he feel like his hands do down at the bottom? We want to try and give him the feels that create that stable, the longest stable point at the bottom of his golf swing, what will help somebody like Rory, because then he can just freewheel it and he can be the natural talent that he is.
I got one more last little follow-up question that just popped in my mind when you guys talked about Rory. Everyone's pushing speed right now. Everybody's pushing over speed training. The stack system, you've got speed sticks. Everyone's talking about speed. One main question that I want, and then I'd also like your take on like Bryson's long drive driver, trying to make it work out there. But the first question I have is, somebody increases their club head speed. What's the threshold for you when it's like, okay, time for a new shaft? Like, is it 3 or 4, 5 miles an hour? Is there a number? I keep trying to pigeonhole you into giving us a specific answer. And I know it's not specific, but just kind of what's your take?
I think you start falling out of flex categories every 8 to 10 miles an hour chase. So, like, 85 miles an hour to 95, you're probably dealing with a regular to a stable regular. Into 95 to 105, you're in a kind of softer stiff into a stiffer stiff. And then, kind of above that 106, 107, you might start looking at more of the X-Flex style shafts. But even within those subcategories, there's the way the shaft was made. There's the torque. There's all these different things that we can use to sort of manipulate the player's feel, but get our performance out at the same time. So, the shaft has evolved an awful lot. I mean, Hal, I know you had incredible success with that bubble shaft. You were driving unbelievable with that thing, and look at what people say now about the bubble shaft. No one's kind of going to make anything that remotely seems like that anymore. But you drove it unbelievably with that.
So how inferior was that shaft compared to what they have today?
It's a great question. And it's honestly one I don't think any of us truly know the answer for. I mean, the butt diameter of that shaft. I mean, I remember as assistant pro trying to put those grips on. It was next to impossible to put the grip on the wide part of that butt end. So there's something going on under the kind of those three fingers on the left hand that changes the diameter, that plays with our feels a little bit. Obviously, it's not a constant taper all the way down because we have this bubble. So, listen, you've probably just given me a great idea for the next video on the YouTube channel. The bubble shaft versus the modern shaft. Let's get into that and let's see what's going on. Why did Hal drive it so good with one and not any better with the modern stuff? Why was that?
Well, I mean, I didn't fear that shaft going left for whatever reason.
Right.
If I feared it going left, I wouldn't have stood up on the tee on 18 against Tiger and hit that driver down the left-hand side, because left is dead. I'm giving it to him if I do that. And
that's right.
I drove it so good with that driver. I drove it the height that I wanted to drive it. And, during my day, I wanted to hit it as long as I could hit it, but I wasn't going to sacrifice accuracy to gain 5 more yards.
Right.
It wasn't going to make that much difference. Mm-hmm. And I think people are sacrificing accuracy now to gain 5 yards of distance.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I do. I think there is a threshold where, people may be pushing on the wrong things. And it'll be interesting to see in time whether all this speed training, whether the players become a little bit one-dimensional. I mean, you saw the kid last week, the young South African lad who was pushing ball speeds at 211 or something like that, and he got into the tour event. I think he shot 79 first round or something like that. He didn't play very well, but there's speed and there's compromising your game in the pursuit of speed, and those two should never cross one another.
Right. Any pitfalls for these 4 and 5 degree drivers that you see coming? What are your quick thoughts on that?
I mean, Bryson's suffered with it with those last couple of drivers. The CG location on those drivers just was not something that he could manage. Anything, for the average driver, you've got to get it low and deep. For Bryson, he needs it projecting up through the middle. This 0 CG they talk about, that's a neutral CG. That's something that allows him to hit it a little bit above the driver, a little bit out towards the toe, and doesn't have massive amounts of gearing subsequently from that. So, yes, there definitely is benefits to going lower loft, even if dynamically you're delivering the right amount of loft. But if the CG is projected out of the wrong part of the head, you're really going to have some pretty crooked results. And we saw that with Bryson at the Open Championship last year. He couldn't control his driver based on the parts of the head he was hitting it. So, again, more of what we're learning as club fitters and how we're able to kind of build the golf clubs for the players, will drive the success.
Well, Ian, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Some great info. If you make a video on House Bubble Shaft, you just have to tag us.
I'll be tagging you in it. Then I'll be coming down to Texas to prove the point with the man himself.
If it's still negative 10 Celsius up there in a couple of weeks, come take a vacay down here. We can definitely get you down here to fit Hal to a new driver.
That would be a blast. No, boys, I appreciate the opportunity. It was great talking with you. I love the podcast. You both do an incredible job. You get on some phenomenal guest speakers. So to come on today and do it with you guys is an honor.
And we really appreciate it. I love the difference between feel and numbers. Chase and I represent both of those. We call it art and science. And,
art and science, that's what it is.
To me, the perfect future golfer is a mixture of both of those things. And, to me, the game is still a game. It's still, it's not scientific, but yet we're leaning towards it with data and all the things that we have available to us now. But there's still, the best players in the world are still artists.
Yeah. And we still need to convey that message. I think we still need to, we still need people like yourself involved in the game and teaching the game that it's not just a swing. There's ways to teach the game, how to play the game, the art of the game, scoring, getting yourself around the golf course. You get the butterflies in your stomach. How do you manage those types of things? That's the game that we play, and we need the people who can educate on that as well.
Well, before we close, Ian, I want your opinion on this. Two of the greatest players that I ever saw play the game were Seve Ballesteros and Lee Trevino, and they were both artists. And Seve, in particular, saw multiple shots. He would look at a shot, and he would see several different ways that he could hit it. He didn't care about data. His data was his last 30 years of playing golf, basically.
That's right.
Of hitting all of these different shots. One of the things that I say about Tiger's the only person I saw that ever played the game that did not fear the next shot before he played this shot. Think about what I just said. Most all of us had a place that we knew we couldn't put the ball and be able to do our best from there. Tiger knew he had the next shot wherever it went. That's an artist right there.
Yeah. You're 100% right. Absolutely love that. Love it.
Thanks for being on, Ian.
You got it, boys.
Thanks for everything you do.
Really appreciate
it. Keep educating the world. Great work.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
See you next time.
Be the right club today. Yes!